What's going on? Short intro today because the stories do the talking. Real Reddit threads, genuinely unsettling, and every one of them actually happened. Subscribe, and let's dive in. My girlfriend knows what I'm thinking before I say it, and I don't know how to leave her. And here's a relationship horror story that starts simple enough but gets genuinely unsettling. The kind that makes you question what you actually know about the person you're living with, and whether you ever had any privacy to begin with. I'm 26 male, and my girlfriend is 24 female. We've been together for just over 2 years now. About 6 months ago, something weird started happening. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd know what I was about to say before I said it. Or I'd think about grabbing a beer and she'd already have one ready. I figured maybe we were just getting in sync. But it got worse. Much worse. She wouldn't just guess what I was thinking, she'd know. I'd think about going for a run and she'd be like, "Going to get that 5K in?" before I'd even mentioned it. I'd be planning to call my buddy and she'd say his name first. Every single time, without fail. I tried thinking of random things to test her, and she predicted those too. I'd wear a shirt and she'd comment on it before I put it on. I'd think about ordering Chinese food and she'd already have the menu ready. Last week, I decided I couldn't do this anymore. I sat her down and told her we needed to break up. I was going to explain that it felt too weird, that I had no privacy in my own head. But when I opened my mouth, before I could say literally anything, she smiled at me. And then she waited. She was waiting for me to finish a sentence I hadn't even started yet. I can't explain how wrong that felt. That smile. That moment when he realized she was waiting for him to finish saying something he hadn't even started yet. That's where this stops being about coincidence and becomes something else entirely. And trust me, it only gets worse from here. This is where it stops being funny and starts being impossible to ignore. It started small. I'd walk into a coffee shop and know I'm ordering cortado, no sugar, and Sarah would already be ordering it for me. First time I laughed it off. Second time was coincidence. Third time, I'm standing there watching her order while she's not looking and just knowing. Last Tuesday at dinner with her family. I'm thinking about how I need to leave early for a work call. Haven't mentioned it. Sarah's in a conversation with her mom and she just stops, looks at me and says, "You're going to need to leave in 20 minutes for that thing." Her mom asks what thing. Sarah smiles and says, "He knows." I didn't know. She did. Then there's this thing where I catch myself about to say something, not even thinking it clearly, and she cuts me off with, I don't want to hear it." She knows what I'm about to say and won't let me say it. 3 times this week. I started testing her on purpose, something she couldn't possibly predict. My password, what car I want, whether I'm angry or tired. Every time, she knows. Not in a reading people way, she's reading my mind before it's formed. I can't explain it anymore, the pattern's too consistent. And that's when the real fear sets in. Because if she can predict his thoughts before he's even formed them, before he's even aware of them existing, then what's left that he actually controls? Every single interaction now has this layer of dread underneath it. Is she knowing his thoughts, or is she just impossibly good at reading him? The line between the two has completely blurred, and he can't find his way back to certainty about anything anymore. And the worst part? He has no idea what she's going to do with this power. So I did what anyone would do. I started testing her. Deliberately. Not casual questions, but actual experiments to prove to myself whether this was all real or if I was losing it. I tested her dozens of times. I'd decide what I wanted to eat in my head, then ask her to pick a restaurant. Every time, she'd suggest the exact place. I'd think about calling my brother, and within minutes, she'd hand me my phone. One day, I counted to 10 in my head and decided to take the long way home. I got in the car and didn't say anything. She drove the long way without asking. I finally asked her how she was doing it. She smiled and asked what I meant. I described everything, the restaurant, the phone, all of it. She said I was imagining coincidences, that obviously we think alike after 2 years together. When I pushed back, she said, "You're not thinking clearly. You keep forgetting you already decided those things because I already knew you would." Like explaining something obvious to a child. That's when I understood how deep this goes. She talks about multiple versions of me, like she's fixing something across different timelines. Last week she said, "I had to make sure this version stuck around." Not joking, completely serious. The more I push back, the easier it becomes for me to doubt myself. I can't plan an escape because the moment I think about leaving, the thought dissolves. I panic. I forget why I wanted to leave. She's always ahead and I'm just shrinking. Have you tried leaving while she's not around? I did try once. I packed a bag when she was at work and drove to a motel. But halfway there, I started having these blank spots in my memory. I couldn't remember why I left. By the time I realized what happened, I was already driving back home. She was waiting on the porch. She didn't look surprised. The comment section filled with people asking the obvious solution. Just go, just leave. But OP's answer to that changed everything. The "other versions of reality" comment is what got me. Is she saying she's manipulating timelines? Because if she actually believes that, she's dangerous regardless of whether it's real. And that question hung in the air. Whether it was real or all in her mind, either way, he was trapped. A few days later, OP came back, and the revelation that followed was worse than anything anyone had speculated. She's done this before, and I'm not the first version of me. I don't even know how to write this. She sat me down and just told me, like she was finally done hiding it. She said she realized I was going to leave and she couldn't have that, so she took care of it. Those were her exact words, took care of it. She showed me things, files, notebooks, photographs from other versions of our apartment that don't exist anymore. She's been erasing timelines. Versions of me where I left, versions where I broke up with her. She said she fixed them. She makes it sound like I was broken in those other realities, and she's protecting this version, me, by ensuring I never get the chance to choose differently. She's rewired me somehow, made it impossible for me to even think about leaving because she's already lived through versions where I did, and she's erased every single one. I'm not real anymore. I'm just the only version she deemed acceptable. She's been doing this for years. I'm not the first me either. She said there were 3 before. 3 other versions of me she eliminated because they wanted to leave her. The comment section erupted. People couldn't believe what they were reading, but they also couldn't dismiss it. The psychological elements were too consistent, too detailed. This sounds like you're experiencing severe anxiety or dissociation. Please talk to a therapist about what you're describing. The inability to form thoughts or leave could be psychological rather than literal. Even if the supernatural elements aren't literal, the isolation and mind games you're describing are textbook intimate partner abuse. You need to reach out to someone you trust outside this relationship. I work in mental health, and even if we assume this is all psychological, dissociation, folie à deux, hyper-attuned attachment, the guy needs immediate intervention. The fact that he's posting here and admitting he can't leave or form his own thoughts is itself a crisis. Whether it's real or not, he's trapped. And that's where it ended. No response from OP, no clarification, no escape. And then, Thread Throwaway 88's account was gone. A friend posted an update from an alt account. She's done this before, and I'm not the first version of me. Hey all, I'm using a throwaway because our friend asked me to post this. He can't post anymore. I don't have time to explain everything in the original thread, but I need to say this somewhere. He's still with her. He's okay. He seems really okay, actually. He says he loves her more than anything. When I asked him what happened with all that stuff he was saying about needing to leave, he didn't know what I was talking about. He looked confused, like the memories just weren't there anymore. He told me that the relationship is perfect, that he's never been happier, that she understands him better than anyone ever could. I don't recognize him. I looked through her social media, and I think this has happened before. There's a pattern in her photos, in how she talks about her exes. She mentions them like they're still somehow hers, like they didn't leave, like they're just different versions of a choice she already made. And I'm starting to wonder if our friend is just the newest version she decided to keep. What lives in that distinction between knowing and not knowing? When the memory is gone, is the prisoner still in the cell? When love is all you remember, and the wanting to leave is erased entirely, is that peace Or is it just erasure pretending to be peace? The comments came in fast, but by then it didn't matter. OP wasn't going to read them. OP wasn't going to run. OP was going to stay because he couldn't remember why he'd ever wanted to leave. She'd made sure of that. If this is real, you need to run. Right now. Don't tell her, don't explain, just leave. This level of control is abusive, and the reality-bending stuff is honestly terrifying. Please update us. I'm genuinely concerned for your safety. The tone of this post suggests you're still with her and possibly in danger. On to the next one. I found my childhood hiding spot again and realized I have no memory of being there. My diary just proved why, and I'm terrified. A woman returns to her childhood home after 15 years. She's there to help with renovations, but what she discovers in the backyard is a different kind of excavation entirely, and her own mind has built a wall against it. And in that backyard, buried beneath lilacs that have grown wild and overgrown, something was waiting to be unearthed. I was 27 when I found it, a rectangular depression in the dirt beneath the overgrown lilac bushes in our backyard. We'd been gutting the house for 3 days when I finally noticed it. The smell hit first. Not rot, something older, stale, like a basement that's been sealed for decades. I pushed the branches aside. There was a shelter underneath, a wooden frame, mostly collapsed, with a rotted tarp stretched across it. Inside were mason jars, all empty, dusty, but the drawings caught my eye first. Crayon marks on pieces of cardboard, simple sketches, stick figures, trees, a lopsided sun. And carved into one of the wooden beams, in careful letters, my name, my handwriting. The same letters from school projects I haven't thought about in 20 years. I have no memory of this place, not one memory. I've lived here my whole life. That's when I found the notebook, wedged deep between the roots of the lilac, half buried, spiral-bound, cream-colored, disintegrating. When I opened it, I recognized the handwriting immediately. Small, messy, shaky. The first entry was dated July 15, 1997. I was 8 years old. I'm at the spot again, waiting for food. Don't know how long this time. My legs are numb from sitting. I don't remember why I'm bad anymore. I just know I'm bad. That's why I have to stay here until I'm good again. Every page was the same, July through September. 3 entire months of my childhood, completely missing from my conscious memory, documented in the desperate handwriting of a terrified 8-year-old girl who thought she deserved to be confined to a hole in the ground. And that's where the real terror begins, because the notebook proves something her brain has refused to remember all these years. 3 months of her childhood, documented page by page, and she has zero conscious memory of any of it. OP went back to the shelter with the diary tucked under her arm, determined to piece together what her 8-year-old self had preserved in those pages. She thought maybe reading the entries would unlock something, a memory, a feeling, anything. That's when things shifted from strange to unbearable. I forced myself to read more entries. July 12th. Legs feel funny. Been in the spot for a long time. Not sure how many days. July 19th. Mom said I was bad. Dad said I have to think about what I did. The spot is hot, but I'm not supposed to leave. July 26th. I don't remember why I'm here anymore. My throat hurts from crying. August 2nd. Is this forever? Nobody answers me. August 15th. I think I've been here my whole life. I couldn't breathe. 3 months. The entries traced from late July through early September 1997, and I had zero memory of any of it. Nothing. No heat, no fear embedded in my nervous system, no trauma echo of those words. It was like reading someone else's captivity journal. I called my mom that night with my hands shaking. Do you remember anything unusual that summer when I was 8? Silence on the line. Then, it was a long time ago, honey. You had behavioral issues. Why are you asking? Behavioral issues? Code for what? When I pushed harder, she folded inward. We did what we thought was best. Kids forget things. You turned out fine. My dad wouldn't even acknowledge the question. He just left the room. But I wasn't fine. I was 8, writing about not being allowed to leave, writing about pain and confusion. And 48 hours ago, I had no idea this shelter existed. Now, I held proof that I spent nearly 3 months confined there, and nobody would explain why. The reality of that blank space hit OP in waves. 3 months of her childhood, meticulously documented in her own handwriting, was completely absent from her conscious mind. Repressed, erased, or maybe something worse. Maybe her own brain had decided that survival meant forgetting. She went back to the shelter that evening and stood in it for the first time since finding it, trying to feel something, anything, a ghost of fear or heat or confinement. But all she felt was the cold realization that the place wasn't a childhood hideaway or sanctuary. It was a graveyard for the parts of herself she'd forgotten she'd buried. So OP starts digging. I pulled out every photo album from the mid-90s. Summer of 1997 is completely gone. My birthday that year, July 18th, there are 0 photos. Before and after, documented to death. But 1997? Nothing. No cake, no decorations, nothing. I checked my school records from that summer. There was a note in my file from late June. I had to sit down when I read it. An accusation at school. Something about inappropriate touching with another student during recess. It said, "Situation under investigation," and then it just ended. No follow-up, no conclusion, nothing about what happened after. The nightmares started that week. My legs feel wrong, constant buzzing, like my nerves don't remember rest. I wake with thighs locked, muscles aching. My therapist says it's my body remembering what my mind erased. I made a timeline. June 23rd, the accusation note appears. July 15th, last photo of me at a friend's pool party. July 18th, my birthday, 0 photos. September 5th, I'm back in family photos, pale and withdrawn. 83 days. That's what the shelter represents. 83 days I cannot access. The Reddit thread erupts. Has anyone ever told you if those accusations from school were actually investigated properly? Because an adult's reaction to a child touching another child should never be isolation. That should be communication and education. This is absolutely chilling. The fact that your mind deleted it shows how severe the trauma was. I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. Please keep working with that trauma specialist. And that's the core of it. Not knowing what else your own mind has locked away. 2 weeks later, OP came back with an update. She'd finally pressed her mother for the truth. She admitted it. My mother kept me caged in that spot for weeks. I found the journal entries, and I can't look at her the same way. I've been seeing a therapist and finally had the courage to confront my mom about July 1997. For years, she deflected every question. This time, she didn't. She admitted everything. My father confined me to the shelter after I made an accusation at school. I was 8. The school investigated and found the accusation baseless. That's what made my father do this. He locked me in that shelter for 6 weeks as punishment, for lying, for making a false accusation, for destroying the family reputation. My mother knew. She brought me food. She watched me go in and out of that space and did nothing to stop it. When I asked her why, she said she thought it would teach me the consequences of false claims. I found my journal entries yesterday. The handwriting gets shakier each page. By September, it just stops. The comment section responded immediately. People were angry at the casual devastation of what her parents had done. Your parents failed you catastrophically. Putting an 8-year-old in isolation as punishment for something she didn't even do? That's abuse, full stop. I hope you're getting real legal advice about this. I'm so angry on your behalf. The fact that your mother knew it was wrong and did nothing is almost worse than your father doing it. She had the power to stop it. The mother's guilt doesn't absolve her. She was the primary caregiver and she chose not to protect her child. That's a different kind of abuse. Passive, cowardly abuse. I'd be just as angry if I were OP. The comments cut right to the core issue. OP's father was the cage, but her mother was the lock. Now OP had to live knowing both had chosen confinement over protection. The shelter had stolen months from her mind. Her parents had stolen them from her will. When OP finally pushed her mother for direct answers, the walls came down fast. She admitted it. My mother kept me caged in that spot for weeks. I found the journal entries, and I can't look at her the same way. It took 2 sessions with my therapist before I had the courage to ask her directly. I called her and just asked why I had no memory of an entire summer. The silence on the line was maybe 30 seconds, but it felt endless. Then she told me. Dad had kept me in the shelter for 3 weeks because I'd told my school counselor something had happened that turned out not to be true. The investigation found nothing. But instead of addressing it with me, instead of talking to me like I was a kid who was confused or scared, he decided punishment was confinement. Mom said she argued against it but didn't stop it. They agreed to keep it from me later, to let me forget, to move past it. But my mind had already forgotten. Completely. 8-year-old me survived it by erasing it entirely. I don't know how to exist in the same room as either of them right now. I cut contact with my mother the day after that call. My father still doesn't know I know. My therapist says I don't owe him a confrontation if I'm not ready, or maybe not ever. The shelter is still there. I haven't decided if I'm tearing it down or leaving it as a kind of marker for what I survived without knowing I was surviving. Comments flooded in. One stood out. The diary entries are heartbreaking. My legs are numb. That physical detail makes it so real. I hope your therapist is helping you process this safely. And what stays with you about a story like this is the bone-deep horror. The moment you realize your own mind has been a stranger to you. That your brain protected you so thoroughly it decided you didn't need to remember. That the people who were supposed to keep you safe were the ones who broke that trust. The worst part isn't just what was done, it's the not knowing. What other summers are missing? What other pain your childhood erased? That kind of discovery rewrites your history in shades of distrust. On to the next one. I'm remembering things about my aunt's basement that don't add up, and I think she was hiding something from the police. This story started with a single memory that wouldn't stop nagging. The kind of memory you don't realize you've been carrying until something forces you to look at it again. I haven't thought much about my childhood visits to my Aunt Karen's house in probably 15 years. She lived about 20 minutes outside town in a big 1970s colonial with this sprawling basement. From what I remember, my mother was weirdly protective about me spending time there. Always made sure my visits were brief, never overnight. And she'd always whisper to my aunt before we left about something I wasn't supposed to do. It took me years to realize she'd always say the same thing. She doesn't go downstairs. I was maybe 6 or 7 the first time I really thought about why that was a rule. My aunt wasn't religious, wasn't paranoid about safety in any normal way. We lived in a quiet town in the Midwest, nothing dangerous. But the basement was completely off limits. My uncle wasn't around much, and my aunt didn't have kids. She was always distant, but I remember my parents exchanging looks when she'd show up to family events. There was something they weren't saying. Last week I saw a missing person post on a true crime subreddit from my hometown. Summer, 1998. The timeline and geography aligned with everything I remembered about her house. That's when the basement memory didn't feel like a memory anymore. It felt like evidence of something. And that's the moment things started clicking into place in a way that made OP's stomach drop. Before this, those childhood visits were just weird. A rule without a reason. An aunt who was kind enough but distant. The kind of thing kids absorb without thinking. But a missing person case from the exact year of those visits? That changes everything. But rules are made to be broken, and OP, at that age, didn't fully understand why one basement was off limits. I remember the day I went down there. I was maybe 6 or 7, and I found the basement door in the kitchen. Just a wooden door, nothing special except how heavy it felt. I opened it and went down. The basement was cold in a way that made me catch my breath. 2 bare bulbs cast yellow light that felt wrong. The smell hit me next. Damp and something else. Something like meat left too long in the freezer. My stomach went tight. I didn't get far. Maybe 10 feet in, I saw shelves, boxes, furniture under sheets, a workbench. Nothing that should have seemed sinister, but the arrangement, the spacing, the shadows did. That's when I heard her footsteps. My aunt was down those stairs in seconds. When she found me, it wasn't anger, it was fear. Real, raw fear. She took my arm, not rough but firm, and her voice was quiet and sharp. "You didn't see anything, and you don't come down here again. Not ever. If you do, bad things happen to little girls who don't listen." I've never forgotten that sentence. Not, "You'll get in trouble." Not, "You could get hurt." Something else. Something that told my 6-year-old self that my mother's rule wasn't about safety, it was about protection. The memory stayed buried for 15 years, until OP stumbled onto a missing person case from the summer of 1998 and realized the dates, the town, and the family all lined up perfectly. It was 3 a.m. on a random Tuesday. OP was scrolling through a true crime subreddit when a missing person post from 1998 stopped her cold. Her hometown. Same county. Same summer she'd visited her aunt. The girl's name was Melissa Chen. Missing since July 5th, 1998 from Riverside County, the town where I grew up, 20 minutes from my aunt's house. Yearbook photo. Blonde, maybe 14. Her bike was found 3 blocks away. Search called off after 2 weeks. No leads. My family visited my aunt late June 1998. I remember because my mom was unusually tense. We left after lunch on July 2nd. Melissa went missing July 5th, 4 days later. I pulled my parents' old calendars from the garage to confirm. July 1st and 2nd, 1998. We were there. Melissa disappeared on the 5th. Same county, same summer. And I had this one fragmented memory of being in my aunt's basement. A person, a corner, machinery I wasn't supposed to see. My aunt kept the basement locked. My mother told her, "She doesn't go downstairs." I haven't slept since I made the connection. The comments came in fast. Some understood timeline matching as a real lead. Others pushed back hard. Contact the police even with vague memories. Cold case detectives are trained for exactly this. Your timeline, location, and testimony could matter. The industrial machinery and boxes detail is really specific. Did your aunt have a business that would require that setup, or was it always a secret? Not trying to be harsh, but repressed memories of someone in a corner are unreliable. Are you fitting a child's memory into an adult true crime narrative? I've questioned it constantly. But here's what's real. My mother explicitly told my aunt I was not allowed downstairs. She doesn't make rules casually. My aunt dragging me upstairs, making me promise, that wasn't a child's imagination. I remember her hands shaking. I remember her face. That was fear or guilt. You're right, the person is fuzzy, but the boxes and machinery aren't. And my parents cutting contact right after that summer, that's documented fact. OP came back a few days later with an update post. I talked to the detective about my aunt. She wasn't the primary target, she was the lookout. I did something I wasn't sure about doing. I found the case file. Sarah Hutchins, missing July 15th, 1998. Police interviewed neighbors, friends, her workplace, my uncle 3 times. I kept searching for my aunt's name in every statement. Not once. She was completely absent from the report except one line. They attempted to contact her the day Sarah disappeared. Got no answer. I stared at that for hours. My mother spent my childhood making sure I didn't go downstairs. And now I'm reading the last confirmed sighting of Sarah was near my aunt's property. Not on it, near it. But the timing. I called my mother yesterday and just asked about my aunt's basement, why I was never allowed down there. Long pause. Then she said, exact words, "Your aunt made mistakes she spent her whole life trying to forget. Some things are better left buried." That's not a denial. That's a confession without saying the words. She wouldn't say more, just kept repeating the case was closed. Nothing could come from digging it up. But if my aunt was there that day, if she saw something, if she helped, then my mother knew. And she's been protecting that secret for 27 years. The comment section exploded. The Sarah Hutchins case is still discussed in true crime circles. LE never had a solid suspect. If your aunt was connected, this could be huge. Please reach out to the case detective. OP, even if you're not 100% certain, detectives prefer false leads to no leads. The case is old enough that they might appreciate any new angle, even if speculative. Contact the sheriff's office non-emergency line and ask for cold cases. Low-pressure way to test the waters. I experienced something similar. The guilt of realizing as an adult what you witnessed as a kid, it's a special kind of trauma. Therapy for this is different. Find someone who specializes in repressed trauma. But the investigation was far from over. The fragmented memories finally found their answer. OP reached out to the detective, and what came back changed everything. I talked to the detective about my aunt. She wasn't the primary target. She was the lookout. I finally worked up the courage to call Detective Martinez. I explained who I was, that I had information relevant to the Blackwood case that nobody ever asked me about. There was a long silence on the other end. He asked to meet, and I drove out to the station yesterday. What he told me made everything click into place. My aunt's basement wasn't a holding space. It was a lookout. She'd signal my uncle when anyone came near the property. The detective said they'd suspected her involvement from the start, but never had solid proof of active participation in the abductions themselves. She died in 2003, so technically the statute of limitations is irrelevant now, but what aided him was that she knew. For over a decade after that summer, she knew exactly where those girls had gone. She protected him. She was his eyes and ears. I don't know how to sit with that. That my aunt, who made me cookies and braided my hair, was complicit in something that destroyed 5 families. The detective wants to review my childhood visits for any other details I might remember. I told him I'd help, but honestly, there's nothing left down there to find. My uncle's long dead. The house was sold years ago. The case is technically closed, but it'll never really be solved. All I have are these fragmented memories of a basement I was kept away from, and now I know exactly why. The comment section had skeptics, as they always do. Playing devil's advocate, your aunt could have been doing literally anything in that basement. Counterfeit goods, drug manufacturing, illegal gambling. Not saying it's innocent, just that your 7-year-old perception doesn't necessarily equal kidnapping. What stays with you about this one is how much damage happens in silence. A sister's protective rules. Whispered conversations before they left. A mother who knew but said nothing. A basement with a locked door. And a child who grew up knowing something was wrong without ever knowing what. OP has fragments, a few childhood visits, a feeling, a warning never explained. The detective has files, but not enough for a conviction now. The women are still missing. The case is closed. And all OP has is finally knowing why she was kept away. On to the next one. I kept getting the same rideshare driver. Now I think he's been stalking me.
This is the kind of story where, looking back, OP can trace the exact moment she should have been afraid. But wasn't. Not yet. It's not some dramatic ambush or obvious threat. It's smaller than that. It's the quiet accumulation of impossible coincidences, each one seeming harmless on its own. The kind of thing you dismiss because what are the odds, right? I'm 28 and use rideshare 4 or 5 times a week for work. Downtown company, impossible parking, so Uber's routine for me. I don't usually pay attention to drivers. Hop in, check my phone, hop out. This one driver, Mike, picked me up 3 weeks ago. Polite, small talk, drove me to the office. Rated him 5 stars and moved on. Except he kept showing up. Different times, different days, but same guy. I thought, coincidence, then Mike again. And again. At this point, I'm noticing, why always him? I'm not paranoid, just thought it was strange. But on the 3rd ride, we're driving to my office and he goes, "See you Thursday?" Casual, like confirming plans. I hadn't mentioned Thursday, not once. I froze and asked what he meant. He backtracked quick, said something like, "You usually work late Thursday, right?" I don't remember his exact words because I was trying to figure how he'd know that. Then a few days later, another ride, and he says, "How's it going at Fuck?" Naming my actual company. Not, "How's work?" Not, "Downtown office." My actual company name. Like he'd known it forever. I never told him anything about where I worked. That's when I realized this wasn't coincidence. That's when I got scared. And that's when it clicks. All at once, not gradually. Everything she's been rationalizing away suddenly makes a horrible kind of sense. What comes next is worse. Much worse. Documentation, escalation, and a discovery that makes her stomach drop.
By the second week, OP couldn't dismiss this as coincidence anymore. She started keeping track of everything. It wasn't just that he was always available, though that alone felt bizarre. Every time I opened the rideshare app, he would be within minutes. 2, 3 at the absolute most. His arrival times defied logic, violating every statistic I understood about how rideshare systems actually work. Even at 6 a.m., when I'd request a ride before heading to the gym, he'd pull up within minutes. How is a driver that consistently positioned that close to me at all times? What made it worse was his absolute certainty about my destinations. I live in this weird neighborhood boundary where drivers mess up constantly. They pull over confused, hunt for the right street, ask me for clarification twice. Not him. He navigated with complete confidence straight to wherever I was going, street level, exact building entrance. Sometimes I genuinely thought he even knew which coffee shop I'd come from before requesting the ride. Like he'd studied a detailed map of my entire daily life. Then came the moments that actually terrified me. During a ride to my office one morning, he casually mentioned my gym, my specific location, not just any gym. I'd never told him I went to that gym, never mentioned my fitness routine. Then a few days later, he casually commented on my work schedule. You usually get picked up around 5:15 or so, right? Like we'd been discussing my daily habits forever. It made my spine crawl. He'd been watching when I leave my building, not guessing, knowing. I started writing everything down. Dates, times, his exact words, patterns I noticed. I tried convincing myself it was all coincidence. Drivers obviously noticed their regular passengers. Maybe I was overreacting, reading too much into normal patterns. But the more I rode with him, the more systematic it felt. Like someone had built a complete profile of my movements and was methodically checking it off. The pieces just wouldn't add up to anything innocent anymore. There was no reasonable explanation left that made me feel safe. That's when the fear became real, concrete, undeniable. OP understood now what it meant to be mapped by someone, to be studied, to be known in all the ways you don't want to be known. And she had no idea how deliberate it had all been, or how long he'd actually been watching, or that she was just one of many women he'd targeted this way. The pattern escalated over days, and that's when the fear truly set in. I started tracking everything, which rides he appeared in, when they came, what he said. After that Thursday question, I realized something was deeply wrong. He mentioned my apartment building by name, the Riverside Complex, something I'd never said. He asked about my work route. How could he know that? I tested him, requested rides from different locations. Didn't matter. From a client site across town, he appeared in 4 minutes. He knew where I was. One ride he just asked, "You live alone in that building?" My stomach went cold. He knew the building. He made comments about my neighborhood, the Thai restaurant on the corner, the park across the street. He'd mapped my block better than I had. I stopped using the app. 4 days without a request. I drove everywhere, paranoid, checking mirrors. If he knows my address, my building name, my schedule, what else does he know? Is he outside watching? On the 5th day, I needed a ride. Late shift at work, exhausted, my hands shaking as I opened the app. He was there in 3 minutes. 3. Not 4. 3. Like he was waiting. Like he knew I'd crack and call. That's when I understood. This was active tracking. The comment section erupted with immediate alarm. That's horrifying. The fact that he had systematic access to customer data is what gets me. This wasn't just coincidence or a creepy crush. This was premeditated surveillance disguised as algorithm luck. The way he went pale when you directly confronted him about it, he knew exactly what he'd been doing and that you were on to him. That moment must have been terrifying. Everyone sensed what came next. OP filed a report with Uber support, and what came back wasn't reassurance, it was a nightmare. He wasn't just tracking me. The police found 17 other women in his files. I contacted Uber 3 days after that last encounter. I was shaking when I made the call. Within 48 hours, a senior investigator called me back. What she told me made me understand that I wasn't paranoid. I was right. The driver had been using his admin dashboard, a feature meant for legitimate driver navigation and customer service, to access passenger profiles, full location histories, home addresses, and detailed ride patterns. Not just mine, 17 other women. 17! He had a folder in his car with printouts of their photos, addresses, work locations, and documented their schedules. The investigator said he'd been cross-referencing the data to position himself in proximity to their homes, timing his app status to appear available seconds after they requested a ride. He knew when they worked late, when they'd be alone, what time they arrived home. The scope of what he'd done hit like a sledgehammer through the community. The part that gets me is he probably thought this was harmless because it's just data. Like he'd somehow convinced himself that accessing location coordinates and home addresses was victimless. Exactly. He was looking at location points and spreadsheets like it was a game. But the second you, the actual human on the other end, pointed out how it felt to be watched, he panicked. That tells you he knew it was wrong. He just compartmentalized it until he couldn't anymore. I need to know, did the police ever explain how he got that kind of back-end access in the first place? Was it something he was supposed to have as a driver and just abused, or did he actively hack into something? I'm getting off rideshare apps after reading this. This is the stuff nightmares are made of, and you can't even tell when it's happening until it's too late. The police took it seriously. Charges came down fast. Unauthorized computer access, stalking, harassment. He was arrested, and Cautious Rider 28 got her restraining order. He wasn't just tracking me. The police found 17 other women in his files. When detectives got the back-end logs, they discovered he'd been systematically querying passenger profiles for months. 17 women. He had their location histories, home addresses, work schedules. Some had his personal notes. Lives alone. Schedule predictable. The DA moved fast. Uber fired him, issued a statement about enhanced security reviews, but it felt hollow. He got arrested on a Thursday. The restraining order was granted, 500 feet from me and every other woman he targeted. I haven't used a rideshare app since. I've locked down every privacy setting, enabled two-factor on everything, researched data brokers, and filed removal requests. I deleted my location history, changed my phone number. Maybe it's paranoia, but I can't shake the feeling that once someone maps your entire life that completely, that knowledge doesn't just disappear. What struck the comments hardest wasn't just the stalking itself. It was that the infrastructure made it inevitable. One company, a background check that missed red flags, a database designed for drivers but weaponized by someone with access. Please tell me Uber is doing something more substantial than firing this guy. That level of back-end access shouldn't be technically possible. I really hope those other 17 women got notified in support. That he was casually admitting to tracking multiple people simultaneously is bone-chilling. For 28 female, the permanence is what gets her. The frictionless convenience that made rideshare so appealing is gone forever. She's not paranoid. She's learned what most of us never have to learn, that systems built for efficiency don't always have safety built in. And that is the last story for today.